Hello, my friends. Hello, and welcome once again to Stately Vaughan Manor, where Roger and I have returned. Because it's Wednesday, that means it's Epic Comic Book Wednesday. Every Wednesday, we'll talk about a certain comic book, graphic novel, or comic book subject. Usually, when he's around, Steve Donoghue will talk about the same comic book, graphic novel, or comic book subject. It is our world's finest team up that we do once a week. In this week, Roger and I return with a very influential comic book, one that everybody who reads comic books has probably at least heard of, and that is Batman. It's Batman Year One, which oddly is a comic book that we haven't talked about on Epic Comic Book Wednesday yet. We've talked about Batman Year Two, but we haven't talked about Batman Year One on Epic Comic Book Wednesday. Okay, well, here we are doing it. This is a story by Frank Miller and David Mazzucchelli. Probably the greatest Batman story ever told. I can't think of a better one than this. This one is just fantastic. So this came after Crisis on Infinite Earths, which revamped the DC universe. Superman restarted with a #1 issue. His origin was redone by John Byrne. John Byrne got rid of a lot of really cool stuff that we all loved in the Superman mythos, but that's okay. Batman did not get that kind of drastic revamp, but they did come up with a new origin story written by Frank Miller, illustrated by Mazzucchelli, that was just dynamite. And it felt like it came out of nowhere, really. Recently, I got the DC Finest volume, Batman Year 1 and Batman Year 2, which has not only Batman Years 1 and 2, but it also has all the stories that came around those issues, because this story was published in the regular Batman comic book in 4 issues of Batman. It was not an independent miniseries or anything like that. It was just a Batman story in Batman. But it was so different from all of the stories that came before it and right after it that it really kind of stood out. That's for sure. Just in its sheer quality and ambition in what it was doing. This was Frank Miller's follow-up to Batman. He had recently done Batman The Dark Knight Returns, which was tremendously popular. And quite good, at least the first part of it was. That was a 4-part story which tells the story of Batman in the future. I have some issues with Batman The Dark Knight Returns. Mostly because Superman is in it, and Frank Miller does not understand and never has understood Superman, and seems incapable of understanding Superman. I think, and I could be wrong, but I suspect that Frank Miller is possibly too cynical to really believe in a character like Superman. And so when he takes on a character like Superman, he turns Superman into something else. However, he is quite good at Batman. Batman, a much darker character, more in his line, more street level character. And the version of Batman that you get in this story is a bit less, actually much less murderous than the Batman that you get in The Dark Knight Returns. And it's just excellent. The artwork by Mazzucchelli is fantastic. And it starts off with a scene in Gotham City. We switch back and forth from Bruce Wayne Batman to Commissioner Gordon, who's not a commissioner yet. And Commissioner Gordon is just entering Gotham City. He's transferring to Gotham. And Bruce Wayne, who's been away training to be Batman, just arrives in Gotham City to start his career as Batman, although at this point he doesn't know quite how to do it. Now, such a well-structured story, this one. And it literally is Batman Year One. You follow these characters along in the year, and you know when everything takes place because he tells you. And just one great scene after another. At this time, Gotham City is just overrun with corruption. The police department is completely corrupt. And so that's something that Commissioner Gordon is going to have to fix, who, like I said, is not commissioner yet. I think he's just Lieutenant Gordon at this point. And we have Bruce Wayne beating up a tree and just, kicking apart his property as he trains. But again, like I said, he doesn't quite know how he's going to be Batman yet. We also get an origin of Catwoman in here, where Catwoman is a prostitute. There's actually some quite dark stuff in this comic. And I mean, some of the darkest stuff you had ever read in a Batman comic book up to this point. But it was that time. It was the mid-'80s. And DC Comics had been, for a while, heading in this direction. Marvel Comics, the more realistic comics, had been doing this kind of thing for a while. Frank Miller was on Daredevil for a long time. Probably his greatest run on anything was on Daredevil. And that was a particularly dark crime comic book, basically. So he brought that to Batman. I remember they advertised this series before Frank Miller came on Batman. And I just thought at the time when I saw that Frank Miller was just going to take on Batman and he would just be the regular writer on Batman for the near future. I thought we would get 40 issues or something of Frank Miller's Batman, but that did not happen. It was only 4, but what a 4 they were. So Batman finally figures out, after he gets his ass kicked and nearly dies in the streets of Gotham, how he's going to go about it. Because this bat, which used to, in the olden days, in the old origin, would just fly in a window. Here it crashes through the glass, to be extra dramatic, and flies in and inspires Bruce Wayne to become Batman. And so he puts together a costume, and we have this great scene. This is our first glimpse of Batman, but this is Batman in action right here. And so this is Batman's first battle. And it's just Batman in his costume fighting 3 thieves. That's it. It's just 3 regular guys on a balcony as they're trying to steal stuff. And he completely screws it up. And normally he should just tear through these guys, but one of the guys is so scared that he falls off the balcony. Batman has to grab him and hold on to him so he doesn't die. And in the meantime, the other guys start beating on him with televisions and things, whatever they've got in their hands. And it's a quite gripping and realistic scene, and it really feels like something that could happen to a guy who's basically just wearing tights and a cape. At the time, this is before the movies. This is before even the first movie. And so in these days, Batman just wore tights and a cape. And that's how he's depicted in this comic book. And it's hard to describe just how powerful this was, because at the time when this came out, most people's idea of Batman, and this is hard to believe now, but most people in the general public, when they thought of Batman, they thought of Adam West from the old Batman TV series. That's who Batman was for most people. He was Adam West, the goofy, campy television series, or he was a cartoon. And not even a good one, because, we didn't even get Batman the Animated Series yet. So at this point, the general public, that's what they thought of Batman. In comic books, it was a little bit different. Frank Miller was not the guy who brought back the idea of Batman being a vigilante, a dark vigilante like he was when he first started. that was actually Denny O'Neil who brought that back, who brought back that idea years before. But even when O'Neil was writing Batman, it wasn't at this level. He was still writing Batman in the normal DC Comics universe with the same DC Comics continuity, you know, with Robin and everything. And it wasn't this. This brought a whole new level of gritty realism to Batman. Usually, I'm not a huge fan of gritty realism in DC Comics, but it depends on the character, and you can really get away with it with Batman. And like I said, it's just brilliant, full of so many brilliant moments. Batman learns how to be Batman in this, continues to rescue the innocent, and that is actually what wins over Gordon. Gordon, who is hunting Batman all this time, because Batman is, of course, a vigilante and a criminal. And the police department firebomb this building that Batman's in, despite them knowing that there were probably people in there. They don't care. They're that corrupt. And there's this great scene where Batman uses a device to call in bats from the Batcave, which was, I believe, used in, what was it? Batman Begins. I think that this whole scene was taken and used for a scene in that movie. It's been a long time since I've seen that movie. I don't really remember what happens in it. But it's just fantastic. I mean, if you haven't read this comic book, it's hard to imagine a comic book fan who hasn't read Batman Year One, but I imagine there are a few of you out there who haven't. You should read it. It is the best Batman origin ever. It's hard to imagine a better origin than what was done in this book. I think it's frankly just the best Batman story ever. Perfectly paced, great characters, excellent crime story. It's everything you want in a Batman story. Unfortunately, right after this, Batman kind of went back to regular Batman. They didn't really know how to follow this up for a while. This came out into the Batman comic books like a bolt out of the blue, and it was just awesome. And it took a while for the Batman comic book to really pick up what was in this book and carry it forward. It took a while, but this was awesome. So you should read this comic book. Okay, Roger, I'll shut up now. I've gone on at length. I will catch you next time.